I've really noticed something lately about how bass move and position themselves when I've been scouring through the hundreds of hours of underwater footage that I have. Most of the time when you have got weather conditions that are not extreme, okay, that more normal fishing conditions, which I know doesn't happen very often, when those bass are moving, okay, when they're relocating, whether it's shallow to deep, deep to shallow, cruising down the shoreline, they're consistently about the same depth off the bottom. And, you know, that's maybe around that 10 inches to a foot or so off the bottom. Now, when we have extreme conditions, let's say an extreme cold front, man, they get right down there tight. Or in the winter time, you know, they're right down there tight when we catch fish and they've actually got mud on their bellies. But the rest of the time, they're about that same distance. Well, how does this apply to our drop shot fishing? Well, what it's really done for me is got me thinking about the differences between the vertical drop shot fishing and that horizontal cast and retrieve drop shot fishing. I want to keep that lure as close to that, you know, about a foot or so off the bottom as I can get. Well, that means when I'm fishing vertical, I'm going to be using that shorter leader. And then I'm going to have a second rod with a drop shot rigged up, and then when I want to cast out and bring that drop shot back to me, that leader is probably going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 feet in length, because when we have that angle between the lure, the weight, I should say, sitting on the bottom and then that line coming back to us, that's a pretty extreme angle when we're drop shotting horizontally. And even with a 4 or 5 foot leader, that lure is only going to be about, you know, 8 to 12 inches off of the bottom. So I will set down and pick up each drop shot rod accordingly to what I'm seeing. If I see a nice isolated, you know, piece of rock or whatever on my graph, I might drop down to it. If, you know, there's apparently nothing on the bottom, it just seems very blah and bland, and I'm casting and retrieving, I'll put down the shorter leader, pick up the longer leader. Now, when it comes to vegetation, we have to distinguish between the type of vegetation. If you have a thicker bottom vegetation like chara, okay, skunk grass, whatever they call it, that's pretty dense. The bass are not necessarily going to be swimming through that. So let's say you've got hard bottom composition, chara that is, you know, 8 inches thick. I want that lure then, when I'm fishing vertically or horizontally, to be about that 10 to 12 inches above that chara grass. Now, if I have something like curly pondweed that is more sparse, it's kind of spread out, well, bass can easily swim through that. Well, in that situation, I'm going to not necessarily be thinking about the sparse vegetation and how tall it is, but relating to that bottom, okay, that bottom composition. So you have to kind of pay attention to, either on your graphs or if you're shore fishing, what you're bringing back, you know, that's stuck on your weights or lures, what type of vegetation you have out there, and that'll give you an idea of if it is creating a second bottom, a false bottom, or not. So that's something to keep in mind as well. This also holding off the bottom about a foot or so does not hold true when you're in a river system with a lot of current. A lot of times those fish, based on how heavy the current is, if there's been some rain, runoff, whatever it might be, they can really sit there and nestle up close to the bottom. Even when we've had stable weather for 3 or 4 days, they can get right down there tight on the bottom. So this idea of them moving and swimming about 10 to 12 inches off of the bottom is really kind of a lake or a pond type of a situation. So give this a shot and let me know how it goes for you. And drop shot rigs are one of those rigs that can really put numbers of fish in the boat quickly. And if you want to watch a video that talks about, you know, what does it take to have that 50 fish day, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.